Here's a strange question. If roughly half of all chickens born are male, why don't we see their brothers alongside the eggs we buy? Where do all those male chickens go? Are they raised for meat? Do they grow into roosters? Or does something else happen before we ever see them? The surprising truth is that male chickens can absolutely be eaten. The real mystery is why modern farming rarely raises them for meat the way it raises specialized meat chickens. And to understand that, we have to go much further back to the beginning of our relationship with the chicken. How did humans first domesticate these birds? When did we begin keeping them for eggs and meat? And how did one ancient bird eventually become two completely different types of chickens, one optimized for eggs and another for meat? The answer begins with the very first chickens humans chose to keep, and a biological difference that would eventually reshape the entire chicken industry. Long before chickens became one of the most common foods in the world, they were wild birds living in the forests of Southeast Asia. They were smaller, faster, and much closer to their wild ancestors than the chickens we know today. So how did humans turn these wild birds into one of the most important farm animals on Earth? It probably didn't happen because someone suddenly decided, let's raise chickens. Instead, the relationship developed gradually. Humans discovered that these birds could live near settlements. They produced eggs. They could provide meat. And the males had another valuable role. They could protect territory, reproduce with the hens, and even become important in cultural traditions. At this stage, there was no huge commercial egg industry. There was no specialized meat chicken. A small flock could have both hens and roosters. And that makes the modern situation even more interesting, because thousands of years later, humans would take this same animal and begin selecting it for completely different purposes. Some chickens would be bred to produce as many eggs as possible, others would be bred to grow as much meat as possible. And slowly, the chicken stopped being just one general-purpose farm animal. Humans began turning it into a specialist. Think about what that means. If you wanted chickens mainly for eggs, you didn't need every bird to become large and muscular, you needed hens that could produce eggs efficiently. And if you wanted chickens mainly for meat, you didn't need them to produce hundreds of eggs. You needed birds that could grow quickly and put on a lot of body mass. So humans started choosing which birds would reproduce. Generation after generation, certain traits became more common. The result was something remarkable. One species began developing into very different types of chickens. And this is where the story of the missing males really begins. Because when you're breeding chickens specifically for eggs, you need female chicks. But nature doesn't produce only females. Roughly half of the chicks will be male. And unlike a female-laying hen, a male chick can't produce a single egg. That creates a problem. A commercial egg farm can spend money feeding and caring for a male chick for weeks or months, but that chicken will never produce the product the farm was created to sell. And there is another problem. Male chicks from egg-laying breeds aren't usually the same as the chickens bred specifically for meat. They tend to grow more slowly and produce less meat efficiently. So the industry eventually faced a strange question. What do you do with the males when you're breeding chickens for eggs? And this is where the simple story of chickens becomes a much bigger story about economics, selective breeding, and human invention. Because humans didn't just change the chicken, we changed the entire system around it. And once that system became industrialized, the fate of a male chick could be determined almost immediately after it hatched. But why? And what exactly happens to these chicks? That's where the story gets much darker and much more complicated. The problem becomes much clearer when we look at how a modern egg farm actually works. An egg-laying hen is bred for one primary purpose: to produce eggs. She doesn't need to grow extremely large. She doesn't need to develop huge amounts of breast meat. Her biology has been shaped around producing eggs efficiently. But when that hen produces chicks, nature doesn't give the farmer only females. About half are male, and those males can't lay eggs. Now imagine this happening on an industrial scale. A hatchery can produce enormous numbers of chicks, but an egg farm only needs the females. So what happens to the males? Some male chickens can certainly be raised and eaten. In fact, humans have eaten roosters for thousands of years. The problem is economics. Male chicks from egg-laying breeds aren't usually efficient meat birds. They grow differently from specialized broiler chickens, which have been selectively bred to gain weight quickly. A modern broiler can reach market weight in just a few weeks. An egg-laying breed isn't built for that. So raising those males for meat can require more feed, more space, more time, and more money for a smaller amount of meat. And in a massive commercial industry, even small differences in cost become enormous. That's how a perfectly edible animal can become economically difficult to raise. And this is where the chicken industry took a very unusual path. Instead of creating one chicken that was equally good at producing eggs and meat, humans created specialists. One type was optimized for eggs, another was optimized for meat. They were still chickens, but their bodies were being pushed in completely different directions through selective breeding. It's similar to building two machines. One machine is designed to do one job extremely well, the other machine is designed for a completely different job. You could try to make one machine do both jobs, but it probably wouldn't do either one as efficiently. That's essentially what happened with chickens. The chicken on your dinner plate is usually not the same type of chicken that produced the eggs in your refrigerator. And that difference created a strange consequence. When you're producing millions of egg-laying hens, you're inevitably producing millions of male chicks too, but the industry doesn't need millions of males to produce eggs. Historically, some farmers could simply keep a few roosters for breeding and use other males for food. But industrial farming operates on a completely different scale. And eventually, a new question appeared. Could humans identify the sex of a chick before it even hatched? That question led scientists toward a fascinating technology called in ovo sexing. Instead of waiting for a chick to hatch, researchers developed methods to examine the developing embryo inside the egg and determine whether it is male or female. The goal is simple. If an egg contains a female embryo, it can continue developing into a laying hen. If it contains a male embryo, the egg can potentially be removed before the chick hatches. It's an attempt to solve a problem created by human selective breeding, using even more technology. But here's the thing, this problem didn't exist in the same way thousands of years ago. It became much more significant when humans transformed chicken farming into a highly specialized industrial system. And that tells us something fascinating about the history of the chicken. We didn't just domesticate the bird, we redesigned its entire purpose. And the male chicken ended up becoming one of the strangest consequences of that transformation.
So, why don't we commonly eat male chickens? The answer is actually simpler than it first appears. Male chickens can be eaten. There is nothing about being male that makes chicken meat unsafe or inedible. Roosters have been eaten by humans for thousands of years, and in many cultures, they are still used in soups, stews, broths, and traditional dishes. The real issue is which kind of chicken the male comes from. A male from an egg-laying breed isn't usually the most efficient choice for commercial meat production. The industry already has specialized meat chickens that grow much faster and produce more meat. So instead of raising one chicken for everything, humans created a system built around specialization. One bird for eggs, another for meat. And that system goes all the way back to the way humans first began selecting and breeding chickens. At the beginning, chickens were much more general-purpose animals. People could keep hens for eggs, roosters for breeding, and both could potentially become food. But as agriculture became more industrialized, efficiency became increasingly important. Farmers weren't simply asking, can we eat this chicken? They were asking, can we raise this chicken profitably? That difference is crucial. A male chicken might be perfectly healthy and perfectly edible, but if another breed can produce more meat using less feed and less time, the industry will naturally favor the more efficient bird. And that's how we ended up with the strange situation we have today. The chicken you eat and the chicken that lays the eggs in your refrigerator are often completely different types of chickens, even though they're the same species. Humans took one wild bird and through thousands of years of selective breeding, turned it into specialized animals designed for completely different jobs: egg production, meat production, breeding, and even traditional cultural roles. So when you ask, why don't we eat male chickens? The answer isn't that male chickens can't be eaten. They absolutely can. The real answer is that modern agriculture has optimized the chicken so heavily that some males simply don't fit efficiently into the egg production system. And that's perhaps the strangest part of the story. A male chicken didn't become worthless because nature made it useless. Its value changed because humans changed the system around it. From a wild bird in ancient forests to a domesticated farm animal to specialized egg and meat breeds, the chicken has been shaped by human choices for thousands of years. And somewhere along that journey, we created a food system where the sex of a chick could determine its economic value almost immediately after birth. A tiny biological difference ended up influencing an entire global industry. If you enjoyed this journey into the hidden history behind the food we eat, like the video, share it with someone who loves fascinating history, and subscribe to the channel for more stories like this. And tell us in the comments, what everyday food should we investigate next?